This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, episode number 217. If you've been telling yourself you need to get your life together, you may be making the task much bigger than it needs to be. Let's talk about how to solve the problem you actually have.
This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland.
Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So what's good here is that we just got back from our summer vacation in California, and I think I brought a cold with me and my voice sounds wonky, but we were in Newport Beach and we spent time riding rides at Disneyland. We went whale watching, lots of fun stuff. And I think there is just a vibe about California, and my whole family really likes it there, and we're already talking about retiring there. And now that we're home and the suitcase is unpacked, laundry's done, we are finding ourselves smack in the middle of back to school season. And with that, emails are pouring in. Sports are starting up, schedules are coming out, and the calendar is most definitely filling up again. And of course, anywhere you go, there are notebooks and backpacks and rows of school supplies. And I don't know about you, but a brand new notebook and a set of rainbow pens makes me feel like I can totally become a new person. And I think there is something about back to school season that just does this to us. And I think part of the reason we love it is because it feels like a fresh start. Even if you're not the one going back to school, there is a natural transition that happens at this time of year. Summer is winding down. Vacations are mostly ending. Activities are starting back up, and schedules are most definitely shifting. And there's a collective sense that it's time to get back to it. So in some ways, back to school feels like an unofficial new year. Maybe not quite as dramatic as January 1. Like, we're not staying up until midnight. In fact, we're going to bed earlier to be up for school, and we're not announcing resolutions to everyone. But all the same, there's a renewed sense of possibility, and these transitions can be super useful. Sometimes the change in seasons gives us the energy and the perspective to look at something that's not been working and decide now we're ready to do something differently about it. But there is a catch, and here's what makes this particular fresh start a little tricky. So January 1, it arrives after the holidays, when life is, in theory at least, settling back down. The parties are over, the decorations come down, the extra chores of shopping, wrapping, mailing, all of that is done. There's a sense that the calendar is opening back up and we can return to normal life. Back to school season is almost the opposite. It gives us the same fresh start energy as January, but it's coming at a time of year when life is becoming way more complicated and full, with school and other fall-related activities picking up after the quieter summer months have finished out. So the demands on your time and attention are increasing, and often this is also the moment when many of us decide that we should get our entire lives together. We want to be more organized, more productive, more consistent, and healthier. And on top of that, we want to exercise regularly, cook better dinners, go to bed earlier, keep the house under control, stay ahead at work, manage the schedules, and finally follow through on all of the things that we've been putting off. And we're going to do all of that while adapting to a brand new full fall schedule. No problem. And to be clear, the desire for a reset itself, that is not the problem. Wanting your life to work better is not a problem either. Noticing that something needs your attention, also not a problem. But the problem is how quickly a reset in one area of your life can morph into an expectation that everything should be different. Meaning, somewhere between buying the school supplies and looking at the fall calendar, you've decided that you have to become a different person. It's the whole life reset. And then we wonder why we feel overwhelmed and don't know where to start. And so that is what we're talking about today, how one specific thing that isn't working can become a full-on life improvement project, and why that makes it so much harder to move forward, and how to manage what actually needs your attention without turning your entire life into a project that you procrastinate. So let's go. So let's start with how this even happens. Because most of the time, it doesn't start with some dramatic realization that your entire life is falling apart. It often starts with something much more specific, like dinner. Maybe dinners at home have felt a little chaotic lately. Or maybe you haven't exercised as consistently as you've wanted over the summer. Maybe your house feels cluttered, or you've fallen behind on work, or you're just exhausted because your evenings have no structure. Those are all specific observations about specific parts of your life. But often, we don't stop there. And instead of saying, my schedule changed this summer and I haven't been planning dinners, we say, I am so off track. Or instead of saying, I haven't figured out when I'm going to exercise with this new fall schedule, we say, I have really let myself go. Or instead of saying, there are a lot of school forms and appointments that I've got to keep track of, we say, I have got to get organized. Or maybe you lump it all together under the sweeping declaration of, I need to get my life together. And I know that I have said that a few times lately. But do you see the difference here? I haven't been planning dinners lately is a specific observation that tells you what's happening. I need to get my life together turns that specific problem into a verdict about your entire life. And once you've decided that your whole life is the problem, everything in your life becomes part of the solution. And suddenly, you need to plan every meal, stop eating sugar, drink more water, exercise 5 days a week, take the supplements that you bought 6 months ago and still haven't opened, stop drinking wine, eat more protein, and lose 10 pounds. And that might sound crazy, but I see it all the time, where the original problem, I haven't been planning dinners, may be completely real, but then that one problem gets buried underneath 12 other projects. And I think this happens so fast that most of us don't even notice we're doing it. We move from a single observation, something isn't working, to a broad, sweeping conclusion about ourselves and our lives. And because the language we're using is so broad, it becomes hard to see what actually needs our attention. Because what does off track mean exactly? Off track with what? Does it mean you haven't exercised in 2 weeks? Does it mean you've been eating out more often? Or that you're going to bed later? Does it mean all three? Or does it mean something else altogether? And until you answer that question, you don't actually know what problem you're trying to solve. And that is how one specific solvable problem becomes an enormous whole life project. We start with an observation, we turn it into a sweeping verdict, and then we attach every possible improvement to the task. And for high achievers, there is another layer to this, because once we decide we need to fix something, we don't just want a basic fix. We want the comprehensive plan. Meaning, we don't want to just make dinner easier. We want an A+ nutrition system, one that includes a planned menu, perfectly balanced meals, an organized grocery list, a stocked, clean fridge, food that everyone likes, and maybe even pretty glass containers lined up on your shelves. And meanwhile, the question that started all of this was, what can we eat after soccer on Tuesday? And I'm using dinner as an example, but we really do this everywhere. We don't just look for a place to fit 2 workouts into our new fall schedule. We decide we need to get back in shape. We don't just catch up on 3 overdue tasks. We decide we need a better productivity system. And we don't just clear off the kitchen counter. We decide it's time to rent a dumpster and declutter the entire house. Or is that just me? So we don't just address the specific thing that isn't working. We add every related improvement we can think of, and sometimes some completely unrelated ones, until the original problem becomes lost. And I want to be clear here. Some of the extra changes you're considering, they may be worthwhile. Maybe you do want to exercise more consistently, and maybe you do want to clean out your closets, improve your sleep, plan your meals, or have a better calendar system. But wanting to make those changes does not mean that they are all necessary to solve the problem that started this in the first place. And if these whole life improvement projects become so overwhelming, why do we even keep creating them in the first place? Why is it so tempting to turn one thing that isn't working into a plan to fix everything? Because at first, a whole life reset doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels like relief. So when multiple parts of your life feel messy, creating a comprehensive plan can give you an immediate sense of control. You may not have changed anything yet, but now you've got a plan. You have direction. You can see a path forward. And that feels really good. And we don't create these big self-improvement projects because we're trying to make life harder. We create them because they give us hope for a future version of ourselves who has it all figured out. And that future version is organized and prepared and consistent. She eats well, she exercises, she stays on top of her email, she remembers appointments. But honestly, we're not just excited about what that future version of us does. We're excited about how she feels. She feels calm and disciplined and ahead of the game. And she's not constantly reacting to life. She is in charge of it. And that is what we're really after when we build new routines, research different programs, or buy new planners. We're not just looking for better systems. We're looking for the feeling of being that person who has got it together. And planning gives us a glimpse of that right away. So you know what I'm talking about. The moment you write the routine, you feel more organized. When you choose a program, you feel more committed. And when you plan the meals, you feel healthier. So you get the emotional reward of making a change before you've actually changed anything. And that does not mean planning is bad. If you've ever listened to this podcast at all, you know how I feel about planning. It's essential. But sometimes planning can feel super productive, even when we're spending more time creating the plan than actually executing it. And along with that, there's a sense of redemption in a reset. Maybe you didn't exercise as much as you intended this summer. Maybe you ate out more often, stayed up too late, drank more than usual, or put things off that you thought you'd have time to do. And now, fall is your chance to make up for it. And while you may not be thinking it consciously, underneath that plan is often this idea of, this time, I'm going to do everything right. It's almost like doing everything perfectly from this point forward can somehow cancel out the past. And if you're a high achiever, adding more to your plan, it feels responsible. Think about it. We've been rewarded our entire lives for being prepared, thinking ahead, and anticipating problems. So of course, when we decide to make a change, we want to think it through all the way. We want to account for the fall schedule, the late meetings, the nights we're exhausted, the food our families won't eat, and every other obstacle that could possibly get in the way. And make no mistake, this does not feel like overthinking. It feels like being thorough, like we're increasing our chances for success. Because maybe if the plan is detailed enough, maybe we won't have to make hard decisions in the moment. Maybe we won't fall behind or miss workouts or disappoint ourselves again. And then the plan starts to feel a little bit like protection from everything that could go wrong. And that is why something like just simplify it, that often does not land, because the complexity of the plan is not random. It's doing something for us. It gives us a sense of control when life feels messy. It gives us hope when we're disappointed and protection from the possibility of getting it wrong again. So we create these whole life plans because at first they genuinely feel like the answer. But the same plan that feels so reassuring in the beginning can eventually become so big that we can't find any reasonable way to begin. And that is where a plan that was originally meant to help you take the bull by the horns can actually keep you stuck in procrastination. So why does this happen? How is it that a whole life reset that is meant to move you forward can actually create procrastination? Well, once you broaden your assignment to get my life together, the first problem is that there is no obvious place to start. But if the task instead is to figure out what we're eating for dinner after soccer on Tuesday, now you've got a clear starting point. You decide what you want to eat, determine what you need, and choose when you're going to make it. And similarly, where do you begin at Get Healthier? Do you start by planning your meals, buying groceries, choosing a workout program, going to bed earlier, drinking more water? Or where do you begin with Get Organized? Do you clear off the kitchen counter, buy a planner, catch up on email, put everyone's activities into a calendar, clean out your closets? Because once everything has been bundled into the same project, all of it feels connected and all of it feels important. So now, before you can take action, you have to decide which part of your entire life deserves attention first. But because no single action feels quite big enough to address a task as enormous as getting my life together, nothing feels like the right or obvious choice. There are so many possible starting points that we struggle to choose one. So we keep thinking about it, but we don't take action. And just as there is no clear starting point, there is also no clear finish line when you're trying to get your life together. You can finish ordering groceries. You can finish planning 3 dinners. You can finish putting the school schedule into your calendar. But you cannot finish being healthier. You cannot finish getting more organized. And you most definitely cannot finish having your life together. Those are pretty big projects with no finish line. So you might take a walk or plan tomorrow's dinner or go to bed on time and still end the day thinking of all the other things you haven't done. So you accomplished something, but compared with the size of the task, it barely counts. The project is still open in your brain, reminding you that there is still way more work to do. And that gets exhausting because even when you are taking action, you don't get the satisfaction of feeling like you completed something. You still feel behind. And then there's another issue here. When you have a big whole life project, every action starts to require several other actions before it can happen. So take getting healthier as an example. So let's say you decide that exercise is the place to begin. Great. But now you need to choose a workout program. And before you choose a program, you have to decide how many days a week you can exercise. And before you can decide that, you need to see what the fall schedule looks like. But the fall schedule isn't totally settled yet, so maybe you should wait. So the thing you intended to start is now left sitting at the end of a long chain of prerequisites. No good. And it's not that you're refusing to do it, it's just that you're not ready yet. And if you've ever spent 3 weeks researching workout programs without doing an actual workout, or if you've saved 40 different meal prep videos without making a single one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We tell ourselves we're preparing to begin, but the preparation keeps expanding and the beginning keeps moving farther and farther away. And then finally, a whole life project, that carries an enormous amount of emotional weight. So remember, we're not just trying to make Tuesday dinner easier anymore. Now, this plan is supposed to prove that we are back on track, whatever that means. It's supposed to make up for whatever we didn't do and protect us from disappointment again. So that plan feels super important. And the more important it feels, the more weight every decision carries. Because now, planning 3 dinners is not just planning 3 dinners. It's part of your promise to finally get healthier, be more prepared, and stop falling into the same patterns. And that is a whole lot of pressure to put on a Tuesday night taco dinner. And when you're starting something that is supposed to prove that you're back on track, but it also carries the risk of failing at something that you've made super important, it can feel way safer to stay in preparation mode. Because as long as you're still researching, organizing, or getting ready, the plan can stay perfect because it hasn't encountered your actual life yet. But once you begin, you have to see whether it works. And that can be a whole lot of pressure. So procrastination doesn't mean that you're lazy, undisciplined, or unwilling to work. Sometimes it means the task you've given yourself is so broad, undefined, and emotionally loaded that you can't find a reasonable way to execute it. And often when this happens, instead of questioning the size of the project we've taken on, we start throwing it back on ourselves. And this is where a practical problem becomes a character problem. Meaning, we aren't just getting home from soccer without a plan for dinner. Now we're disorganized. Or we're not just struggling to fit exercise into a new schedule. Now we have no discipline. And once we turn what is happening into a statement about who we are, the original problem becomes much harder to see. So when you hear yourself thinking, I need to get my life together, I want you to separate what is actually happening from what you're making it mean about you. So that means what is actually happening without the interpretation. So maybe it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I get home at 7:30, no one has eaten, and I don't know what to make for dinner. Now that is very different from my evenings are a disaster. My evenings are a disaster, that is your verdict. So ask yourself, what am I making this dinner problem mean about me? Maybe it's that I'm a mess, or I should be able to handle this, or I'm terrible at managing my time. Those thoughts may all feel like objective descriptions, but they're not. They're conclusions you've made from your situation. And then notice how much harder and heavier the problem becomes when you attach a verdict about yourself to it. Because now you don't need to just figure out dinner, you need to prove that you are organized and capable and able to follow through. But it does not have to be that deep, because not every point of friction in your life is evidence of a larger personal failing. I want you to really hear that. Sometimes dinner is simply a logistical problem that needs a logistical solution. And once you stop asking what the problem says about you, you can start asking what the problem actually needs from you in order to solve it. So how do you put this into practice? Okay, let's stay with the dinner example here. We've identified the actual problem. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, you get home at 7:30, no one has eaten, and you don't know what to make for dinner. Now we've got something to work with. And now the question becomes, what would an improvement look like in this specific situation? Not what would make your entire diet ideal, not what the healthiest version of you would make every night, but just what would sufficiently solve the problem of dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And maybe the answer is, on those nights, I want to have something reasonably healthy that everyone will eat and requires less than 10 minutes of prep time. Okay, now we have a clear target. You aren't trying to become a better, healthier, more organized human. You're just trying to make dinner easier on 2 busy nights. So what is actually required to make that happen? Maybe you need to choose 4 reliable dinners that you can rotate through on those evenings. Maybe you keep 2 freezer options on hand at all times. Maybe you order groceries for delivery instead of waiting until you've got time to go to the store. Or maybe you buy prepared food and stop deciding that it doesn't count because you didn't make it from scratch. And none of these solutions are especially fancy, but fancy was never the problem. The problem was that everyone was hungry at 7:30 and you didn't know what to feed them. And we're solving for that. And then once you have a possible solution, you do one final check. And I want you to ask yourself, what have I included that is not actually necessary to solve this problem? Do you need to organize the pantry? Do you need to change your breakfast, stop eating dessert, start a new workout program, or lose 10 pounds? Do you need to spend all day Sunday meal prepping? No. You may still want to work on some of those things eventually, but those are separate projects and they're not necessary in order to solve your 7:30 dinner problem. And I want to be clear here, this is not just another way of saying choose the smallest possible action. Sometimes the problem you actually have requires a significant solution. Like if your previous workout time no longer works because now you're responsible for getting everyone out the door in the morning, that may require a conversation with your partner about dividing responsibilities, or enlisting the help of older kids in your family, or changing your schedule. Or if work is spilling into every evening, the solution may require changing a boundary, or delegating something, or having an uncomfortable conversation and not downloading a better productivity app. So the goal isn't to ask, how little can I do? The goal is to ask, what would sufficiently address the problem I actually have in front of me? Sometimes the answer will be very simple. Other times, it will require a bigger, more complex change. But the scope of the solution should match the scope of the problem. It shouldn't be bigger than the problem because you're trying to fix every part of your life. And it shouldn't be smaller than the problem because you're trying to avoid something difficult. You name what isn't working. You decide what an improvement would look like in that situation. You identify what's actually required and then remove everything that isn't. And that is the difference between creating another enormous self-improvement project and solving the problem right in front of you. And this is not only about dinner, okay? The same thing can happen with exercise. So maybe fall arrives, your schedule changes, and workouts stop happening. And almost immediately you think, I've got to get back in shape. Great. But that one sentence can launch an enormous new project. Now you're researching gyms, comparing workout programs, looking at new equipment, deciding whether you should start running again, and trying to find the perfect combination of strength training plus cardio. But before you build an entirely new fitness plan, let's get back to the problem that you actually have here. Maybe your workouts were going fine over the summer, and maybe the problem now is that the time you are exercising no longer works now that school starts. So that's not necessarily a fitness problem, that's a calendar problem. And if the problem is that your old workout time no longer fits, the solution may be looking at the new schedule and identifying 2 or 3 times when exercise realistically could happen for you. So you may need to make an adjustment to your schedule, but you may not need a new gym, a new program, or an entirely new identity to go with it. And you might eventually decide that you do want a different program or a new goal. No problem, but those are separate decisions. They don't automatically fall under the problem of your summer workout time disappearing once school starts. And here is something important to note. Taking this approach does not mean that you're lowering your standards or letting yourself off the hook. You're just separating the problem in front of you from every other improvement you could potentially make so that you can actually get started and solve the problem. Because sometimes I need to get back in shape really means I need to find a workout schedule that fits my life now. And those are 2 very different tasks. So here's what I want to leave you with today. None of this means you shouldn't make changes now that fall is coming and back to school season is here. But if you're thinking of a whole life revamp, that may not be necessary. Meaningful change does not have to begin with the assumption that everything in your life is a mess and you've got to get it all together. And you don't have to address every part of your life all at once. You also don't have to turn one difficult stretch or one difficult part of your day into a verdict about your entire life. And you don't have to become a completely different person before you can make something work better. You can have big, ambitious goals without attaching them all to the same self-improvement project. You can also improve one part of your life, let that improvement count, and then decide what you want to address next. There is no one right way to do this. Because setting other projects aside for now doesn't mean you're ignoring them forever. It just means they don't all have to be solved at the same time before Tuesday night dinner can get easier, or before you can find a workout time that fits with your fall schedule. So if this back to school season has you thinking that you need to get your life together, slow down before you start trying to revamp your entire life. Ask what actually needs your attention right now. What specifically is not working? What's an improvement that would make that particular situation better? And what have you attached to the project that doesn't need to be there? So maybe you don't need to get your health back on track. Maybe you just need to find a consistent time for lunch. Maybe you don't need to get back into shape. Maybe you just need to find a new time to exercise. Maybe you don't need to become more organized or disciplined. Maybe you just need a new plan for Tuesday and Thursday nights. Do you see that? A fresh start can still be a fresh start without becoming an entire, complete reset. Solve the problem that is actually in front of you. Let that solution be enough and move forward from there. And if you want help with this, let's go. When you coach with me, we'll get specific about what isn't working and create a solution that fits your actual life without turning yourself into another project that needs to be fixed. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact, and let's talk about how coaching can help you make meaningful changes without trying to overhaul everything at the same time. All right? Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week.
Hey, if you want to build muscle but don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and download my free guide to help you maximize your strength training. Inside, you'll find the essential exercises for building muscle, plus simple 1, 2, and 3-day workout plans that you can follow with just dumbbells and a bench. You'll also find strength training tips to help you train smarter and see real results. My goal is to help you get strong, and this strength training guide will help you do it. Go to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and check it out. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.